We're going to do 10 different game retrospectives all at once today, starting with one of the most beloved Game Boy games, Super Mario Land. Super Mario Land was initially supposed to be the pack-in title for the North America Game Boy launch, but somewhere on the road to release, Tetris was swapped in and the rest is history. And to be honest, I don't know why Mario Land got the shaft. It's a very tight, responsive, quirky, little fun Mario pocket-sized adventure. It's 12 levels and about an hour and a half of pure fun. To dive into the gameplay, it's exactly what you're expecting aside from the jumping and the enemies. The sense of speed is great, but the jumping is tweaked ever so slightly. Speaking of tweaks, the fireball is so different from the norm. It set the fire down an adjacent angle to the player and it's very odd, but it's doable. And I also wanted to touch on the great variety of enemies. Look at the mosquitoes, all the damn lions, and the ninjas and the Easter Island heads everywhere. This game is just ridiculously out of control. Koopas just blow the fuck up when you kill them now, and we got these asshole seahorses too. I just wanted to hop into a couple notable levels. 1-3 with all the lions was a good challenge. 2-3 is a Crash Bandicoot huge adventure style shooter and I loved it. 3-1 is absolute chaos. It just looks like Probopass land and it's just about as crazy as you can get on Game Boy. Before I wrap up and give my consensus on Mario Land, I wanted to say that the snakes are very cute and they're one of my favorite parts of the game for sure. I'd say if you haven't given this game your attention, you're doing yourself a disservice. Up next, we have Hollywood Pinball, and this is an oddball for sure. This game was seemingly released exclusively in Europe in 1999. It's such a non-factor in the GBC legacy that I can't even find a definitive release date. With all that being said though, the game isn't entirely shovelware. I don't think it's a waste of your time. Once you get past the creepy ass claws and the WWE Def Rebel remix of the 21st Century Fox intro, you'll see why this game got its namesake. Hollywood Pinball is a parody game. All of the pinball games are movie parodies, and none of them are funny. Most of them aren't even really well made to begin with either. The controls don't help too much. You'd think you just press A and B, but you're controlling the bumpers with up on the D-pad and B. It's very odd, but it gets normal after a while, and the whole game does a good job of sucking you in once you get a good board like Double Agent or Galaxy Wars. This is definitely a game where you're meant to just turn your brain off to. Honestly, I could say that I'd give this game a light recommendation, especially if the issues of Pokemon Pinball and its scrolling are a huge turnoff to you. This game is one of the smoothest 8-bit pinball games I've ever seen. ECW Hardcore Revolution. Now I feel like I knew what I'm getting myself into. This is an Acclaim wrestling game on the Game Boy. Acclaim was notoriously a dogshit developer for wrestling titles. And the main port of ECW Hardcore Revolution on home consoles is a dog water quality reskin of an already disappointing WWF Attitude. This game though, for what it's worth, could have been a lot worse. I just want to start off by saying the fact that such luminaries like Balls Mahoney making it into a Game Boy Color game for children is funny as shit to me. But initially, the controls and grappling mechanics here are horrendous. You feel like nothing is responsive and everything feels random at best. But then you give it like 3 or 4 minutes and play as a better character with better attributes like Mike Awesome or Raven, and the game suddenly becomes pretty playable. The finishing moves in the game are also a sick inclusion and they're pretty satisfying, as well as well animated. The addition of weapons is crucial to maintaining the ECW feel, and I feel like they're decently implemented. It has me wondering why New Jack wasn't included in this port. Once I stopped pondering what could have been, I realized I had been getting my ass kicked by Jerry Lynn for about 5 minutes, and I just put the game down. I'd say if you're an ECW fan or a wrestling fan in general, pick up this one only out of morbid curiosity. Now we're on to Bart and the Beanstalk. Definitely the most odd game I've ever covered in depth here on the channel. This game is just an ugly duckling, both metaphorically and in a literal sense. Who the fuck greenlit this idea? They had to have slapped Simpsons sprites in a Jack and the Beanstalk game that was dormant. There's no way this game was conceptually a Simpsons game from start to finish. The cutscenes read like Mad Libs and everybody just looks so out of place in this setting. This was in golden era Simpsons. They hadn't plugged these characters into every story ever written yet, So this is definitely a square peg in a round hole. I'm stuck using a slingshot, which is on brand for Bart, but you're telling me I can't just jump on anything like a platformer should? The slingshot is piss-ass slow, and it's practically the only constantly usable weapon. The whole game is just needlessly cryptic and challenging with how slow everything is executed, and the idle animation for Bart is just fucking creepy. Getting past the opening layout to the vertical platforming though is like pulling teeth. I can't say in the end that I absolutely hate this game. It gets very moderately enjoyable after the opening clunkiness, and I actually got far enough to see a decent variety of enemies. But bottom line, I don't think this is worth anybody's time. Not even the people who made the game. Our next game is the third in a series of homages to Nintendo's handheld predecessors. We're looking at Game & Watch 3. These games were made essentially to show how far handheld technology and gaming had come, and to show that the core gameplay of these games are all timeless. The graphics are immaculate for Game Boy Color. Everything is beautifully vibrant, and the animations and sprites are all pretty stunning. The gameplay is pretty fluid and tightly controlled, but I can't lie and say it's not a bit boring at times. But that's forgiven when you put into context that these games are ancient, and there's a great variety of titles included on the cartridge. Some standout games included for me would have to be Turtle Bridge and Greenhouse. All of the modern game remakes are just beautifully crafted, and they're great time wasters. I feel that Yoshi stands head and shoulders above everyone in terms of being the star of the show here. I also appreciate the Mario Bros seemingly being mechanics in the classic game. I like the aesthetic of their body shop a lot. It's very cute, and the animation when they load the truck is very endearing. Overall, I'd have to say I recommend Game & Watch 3. It's a solid time waster for sure, and a worthy addition to anybody's Game Boy collection. Up next, we got the GBA port of Simpsons Road Rage. I've 100% of this game before as a punishment stream, but this is a whole different story. Road Rage for GBA is a complete 180 from the console ports. This game uses Mode 7 Mario Kart Super Circuit style parallax graphics, and it's a double-edged sword. When it's not too cluttered and confusing, it's one of the most beautiful, colorful, best-looking GBA games to me. But there's times when I have almost no idea what's going on because everything is so flat on the map. All of the sprites look great though, and the overall presentation in general is better than the main console ports. It's a lot more faithful to the Simpsons IP. There's 16 playable characters here compared to the OG's 21. Not a bad number for how much we're compensating in storage capacity. In my experience, Mo seems to have the fastest and the best handling. I do think it's funny though that Grandpa's Shriner cart was renamed Cart in the GBA version. I guess they didn't want children potentially learning about masonry.
Shut up!
There's so many kick-ass levels here to choose from though. The standouts have to be Springfield Dam, Country Road, and the epic and expansive Springfield Mountains. I love the water effects in this game. The GBA and DS era always made water very appealing. I also really appreciate the orange sky of downtown, and the tunnels and multiple drastic scenery changes of Country Road and Springfield Mountains blew my mind. Now I do have to emphasize this game is hard. It takes a while to get yourself into a groove, and mission mode doesn't let up either. They were out for blood with the Frank Cloud mission. And speaking of gameplay differences, we get a unique mode, Performance. It's not mind-blowing or anything, you literally just drive around according to the passenger's preferences, but it's a bit more fun for your effort. I have to get into criticisms before I wrap it up here. The music sounds very familiar and repetitive at times. And I understand it's limited to 32-bit sound, but Mario and Zelda never use that as a crutch. They could have done more with the music, same goes with the characters. There's auto missions like Lurleen as a passenger, the Isotopes mascot, Lenny and Carl, Sideshow Bob, the list goes on. And with no voice acting, they should have done a lot more characters. I just don't understand because there's no time crunch like the first game. They had 2 full years to get this port out. Well, we've covered 2 well-received games in a row. Time to fuck it all up with SpongeBob Legend of the Lost Spatula. We've sure come a long way, haven't we? With a dog water quality first game like this, you'd think the Bob wouldn't have made it too far, but I'm so happy to be wrong here. This game is an archaic relic that needs to stay a trivia question for the rest of time. I was tattooed today for 2.5 hours, and I'd sooner go through that than ever have to touch this shit again. But before I tell you how truly god-fucking awful this was, we need to set the scene. I can see it now. March 13th, 2001. My Way by Limp Bizkit is the number 3 track on the rock charts. WrestleMania 17 hasn't even happened yet. And Shanghai is the latest SpongeBob episode. And the world was at peace. And then this 8-bit yellow bastard had to ruin everything. Legend of the Lost Spatula is a vicarious fucking Visions game. You know, the Crash Bandicoot team. They made this. Yeah! We start with a bog standard GBC slideshow cutscene that every game back then started with, and then we get thrown right into Bikini Bottom with little to no clue what the hell I'm supposed to do. I talk to everyone it can, and it dawns on me. This is one of those "where the fuck do I go" type of games. Yeah. The cryptic layout is only the appetizer for how truly fucking boring and monotonous this game becomes within minutes.
Holy fish paste, what is that? That's the appetizer!
And then you run into the biggest problem in the game, with your first enemy. The weapons and the weapon wheel are all dog shit. It's so ridiculously slow and counterintuitive to have to press select every single time I want to swap a weapon. It's the main mechanic of the game. And the enemies want to be total pricks about it. The godforsaken scallops want to either bum rush you when the screen crunch is so bad that you can't see them, or surprise you when you unpause the game to select another weapon. It's so cheap, I just can't stand it. And God forbid you run into a new enemy deep into a level where you have no idea where the game could just randomly decide where there's a checkpoint. Honestly, you're better off just swinging at them with whatever you have in your hand, but you shouldn't have to make that choice. Then once you stumble upon a further level of the game by absolute accident, you run into shit that has nothing to do with the SpongeBob lore. Random prehistoric tadpoles and shit that looks like it came from SB129.
As seen in episode 17!
But I genuinely feel like they just came close to a deadline and stopped giving a fuck about the lore. And I know I've been showing boss fights here and there, but truthfully that's just a break from the visual monotony. I couldn't make it to a single one. I had no clue where to go in this game. And on the topic of visuals and audio, both are bottom of the barrel here, even for the Game Boy Color. The music is ear-piercingly repetitive as all hell, and everything in the game is butt ugly. Before I conclude, I will give this game the most genuine flowers I possibly can. I like SpongeBob's idle animations, and his rip pants gag genuinely got a laugh out of me. So the game isn't entirely without merit, it's just better absorbed secondhand through a video like this. Let's get on to our final game today. Let's move on to King of Swing. We're almost entirely depending on our shoulder buttons. This game made a good initial impression. The presentation is refined and the animations are very nice. I'm not a huge DK fan, but I very much appreciate the effort of getting so many members of his games into the game. All of the sprites look gorgeous, especially DK's Patrick Star in the tree dome holding his breath face.
What kind of place is this?
So the way this game works, as you can see, is I'm swinging left and right on the shoulder buttons and I'm rotating on these pegs to line myself up for a charge to get greater verticality or kill enemies. The tutorial here was a long one, but it was a really necessary tutorial. Bananas also replenish health and can grant invincibility. Honestly, once you get into the groove of spinning along the pegboards, this game gets really satisfying. I feel like King of Swing has a really strong sense of accomplishment when you finally make it to the end of a level. It's a true challenge, but you're not given faulty tools to complete it like Mario Pinball Land. Honestly, I didn't want to put the game down. I wholeheartedly enjoyed my 30 minutes with it. I have my very small nitpicks though. I feel like the music could have been better, but that's splitting hairs. I also hate how ugly the little rats are and they kind of clash with the art style. I feel like they could have done a lot to differentiate the levels by decorating these big giant yellow pegboards. I understand it's the main traversal mechanic in the game, but they could have done more with them. They could have made them icy in the cave level or mossy in the jungle, just something different to look at. I guess my biggest problem with this game is it didn't get much of a marketing campaign in the US. It's a strange idea for a platformer, but the game is good. It's certainly better than Pinball Land, which I couldn't get any sales figures of, which is leading me to believe that it flopped. But King of Swing sold almost 300,000 units worldwide, and despite that, the US port seems like an afterthought, and I don't understand why. I guess part of it was like a Wind Waker type deal where the graphics were being criticized for being cartoony, but I mean, Wind Waker still sold 4.6 million copies.